Ovulations, old bean.
And welcome to our 10-year anniversary retrospective of the hit series Video Game High School. That's right, folks. Grab your gear, say goodbye to Cheeto, and come along with me for some tens of minutes while we get into stuff. In 2012, back in the golden age of YouTube, a channel led by the creative genius of Freddie Wong released the first season of Video Game High School. The series initially followed Brian D. as he was suddenly accepted into and subsequently learned to navigate the unfamiliar terrain of VGHS. As the show grew, so did the cast, and the audience became invested in the lives of what we'll call the Core Four. Over 3 seasons, we were given an intimate look into the wacky and hectic lives of Brian, Key, Ted, and Jenny. Healthily mixed in with the comedy and lighthearted nature of the show was a story about young love, high school, and how the real game was the friends they made along the way.
Does that game include a minigame about being full of crap?
Up to this point, Freddie W. and Rocket Jump were known for their action shorts. Their videos were impressive, to say the least, constantly putting them on the homepage and catching the attention of hundreds of thousands of people. The Rocket Jump crew was deeply entrenched in internet, video game, and nerd culture. Their name was taken from a trick in Halo that would allow a player to jump higher than they should have been able to. And the name was fitting, as those early videos did just that for the channel. They developed a dedicated following, with subscribers waiting for their next weekly release with the same level of anticipation as Monty Ohm fans. Freddie W. and crew decided it was time to set their sights on something a little more ambitious. Rocket Jump was going to give the big boys a run for their money.
That's what I'm talking about, and you accountant, you're my man right there, laying it down, large and in charge.
Through a Kickstarter campaign, Rocket Jump raised over $270,000 for Season 1, giving them a sizable budget to work with. Not Hollywood-sized, mind you, but with the proper application of funds and talent, they could definitely make a Hollywood-caliber production. Get out of my shot. And that is exactly what they did. The premiere was an instant hit. Fans around the globe were connecting with Brian D. and his desire to play with the best of the best. Those first 9 episodes gave the world a taste of what Rocket Jump could bring to the table, and the internet was hooked.
What up, Matrix? What brings you our neck of the cafeteria?
It was the perfect team, with Freddie Wong and Matthew Arnold as the primary directors, Will Campos and Brian Ferenzi, who also played the Law, heading up the writing team, and Brandon Lash leading the effects team and kind of being a jack of all trades on set. They couldn't miss. I don't really have a transition here. Look, from here on out, I'm going to be spoiling the entire series. So if you're watching this video and you haven't watched Video Game High School, first of all, I admire the fact that you live your life by the seat of your pants. And second,
why?
You should really watch this show. And while I'm thinking about it, if I get on a tear, I'm probably going to spoil some other stuff too. Bruce Willis was dead the whole time! So, Season 1 was somewhat of an experiment for Rocket Jump. The episodes were typically 10 to 15 minutes long, with the finale being about 20. The story this season centers around Brian D. getting a scholarship to the titular Video Game High School on what some would argue was a fluke. The main villain of the season, the Law, is a world-renowned Field of Fire player who is the captain of the VGHS varsity FPS team. He drops into a random lobby on live television and demolishes everyone. Brian is found to be AFK,
away from keyboard.
So Law decides to have a little fun. His hubris is his downfall, however, as while he's setting up his trick shot, Brian returns to his keyboard and kills the Law. Throughout the rest of the season, Brian is really just learning the flow of VGHS and experiences quite a bit of culture shock. On top of that, the Law is hiding around every corner, trying to ruin his reputation or get him expelled. His fellow students either hate him or are threatened by him, and it takes him a while to really find his groove. Luckily, 2 students he meets on his first day.
I'm Swan.
Ted Wong.
become his safe space, and the three of them form a fast bond. On his first day of school, Brian also meets the JV FPS captain, the famous Jenny Matrix, whom he immediately develops a crush on. In later seasons, the extent to which the various styles of video game impact the culture of the school is more fleshed out. But here in Season 1, the primary focus is obviously on the FPS team because of Brian D. We get a bit of a subplot about the rhythm gamers and the drift racers when we follow Ted and Key, but generally speaking, we are watching what happens with the FPS tryouts.
Cast off that silly little plastic guitar and grip the steering wheel of destiny!
VGHS is a very ambiguous mix of both high school and college. The personal and emotional issues that the students are facing, especially in Season 1, tend to be things that most people have to address in their mid to late teens. The school itself, however, seems to function more like a college. The class structure, the focus on sports, and the plot device of the students having to declare concentrations all feel like things you do in college. Then again, I was homeschooled, so what the hell do I know about high school? Let's call somebody. There we go. Hey, Travis. Yeah, buddy. Hey, quick question for you. He hung up. I'm really proud of these titles, y'all. I hope you're enjoying them as much as I am. Also, this is our new setup for the rest of the show, so deal with it. Now, the teen drama really is at the heart of the show. Video Game High School, when you boil it all the way down, is about growing up. It's not your typical coming-of-age story, though. Even with as lighthearted as it is, it does not treat the relationships and problems of the characters with any real fantasy. Brian struggles with his feelings for Jenny Matrix, he struggles with being bullied by the law and so many of his peers. He struggles with being the new kid and the poor kid. Key Swan, brilliant as she is seen as an oddball from the get-go, and she both accepts it and is bothered by this. She understands who she is in a general sense, and grew up in a home where her intelligence and adherence to the rules was cultivated. At the same time, however, she does yearn for the acceptance of her fellow students and wants to find a place where she fits in. She bonds so quickly with Ted and Brian, finding a home amongst her fellow openly confused teens. And sweet, poor Ted. All he wants out of life is his father's approval, which is something he will clearly never get.
Because if you don't give the people what they want, and they'll divorce you, they'll take your sweet dirt bike, and they'll leave you with a no-good loser for a son.
His father, head of the rhythm gaming department, Professor Freddie Wong, played by Freddie Wong, no relation, not only seems to disapprove of his son in every single way, but actively seems to despise the boy. You'll notice I haven't really talked about Jenny Matrix much yet, and that's because she's not really a perspective character in Season 1. She is very much the impetus behind a lot of Brian's decisions and some of his problems, but we don't really see anything from Jenny's perspective until Season 2. So the core four weren't really four yet. They're more of a triplet, triangle, triumvirate, if you will. There were a surprising number of cameos in Video Game High School. In the first season, some of the big-name cameos included Philip Wang and Wesley Chan of Wong Fu Productions, Arden Cho, who at the time had worked on a few projects with Ryan Higa and would go on to have a main role on the MTV hit series Teen Wolf. And yes, I have lots of thoughts on that particular gem as well. Moving on, others include iJustine and Shazam himself, Zachary Levi. I really like that Brian is not a special boy or a chosen one type character. He's fighting for a place on the JV team. He's just some kid trying to follow this wild dream, hoping he can be good enough to stay and play with the best of the best.
How crowded as that kid can play.
I hate that kid.
Especially at a time when Harry Potter and Percy Jackson and the Hunger Games and insert young adult media here were so hell-bent on using the chosen one trope. Having Brian D as the truest everyman we have possibly ever seen in the genre was very refreshing. There's also a plot thread that stretches across the distant background of all three seasons where the president is missing. You don't really hear much about it, and I don't know, I had no place for this. I just find it really funny. The Kickstarter for season 2 was able to raise over $800,000, so Rocket Jump was really able to kick up the quality of everything, really. I mean, the effects skyrocketed. The length of the episodes went from a 10-minute average to a 30-minute average. Everything about the show was elevated thanks to this much larger budget. For season 2, the show really did grow with its audience and its characters. Now, granted, not a lot of time has passed in VGHS land between seasons 1 and 2, but the core 4 definitely gotten more comfortable, found their niche. They know where they stand as far as the school goes. You could say that the core 4 have somewhat found their identity. I say somewhat because they are 16, and the likelihood of a 16-year-old having a firm grasp on their identity and their worldview is a statistical improbability. If you do find a 16-year-old that knows exactly who they are, what they want, and what they're about, be very afraid. They might be a dictator, or there's worse things than dictators, right? This season is all about relationships. Everyone's gotten comfortable with each other at this point. Jenny is a perspective character for us this time around, and we get to see the frosty relationship she has with her mom on full display. Coach Mary Matrix shows up and lays the hammer down on the JV FPS team.
Mom? Coach Matrix.
And for good reason. The law has been accused of and quickly convicted of aimbotting and hacking. He is kicked out of the sport for forever. The varsity FPS team are stripped of their championships and are not allowed to play this season due to the implications of Law's crimes or potential crimes. We'll get into that a little bit later. Our kooky, lovable Swan puts her 1,000 IQ brain to work and finds a loophole in the rules that allows the JV team to take the place of the varsity team.
Thank God for weird student Swan.
And so the JV FPS team must stand up not only to the competition, but also to the harsh leadership of Coach Matrix. Jenny and Brian's relationship becomes more mutually romantic this season, but for the most part, it has to stay hidden, since Coach will bench both of them if she finds out they're dating. Romance is a big theme in season 2. Brian loves Jenny. Jenny doesn't know if she loves Brian. Law falls in love with Shotbot. He loves Ted. Ted realizes over the course of the season that his love for and his relationship with Key is the only thing he really trusts.
You're awesome, Key.
Brian D.
Your mom's a cat.
Your mom's cat.
Now not only gets to travel the treacherous road of having his first relationship, but also of having to keep it a secret from everyone. When it comes to love at VGHS, Pat Benatar was right.
Love is a battlefield. Do you get it?
God, I'm tired. BD has a lot on his plate this year. As the same time all that is going on, he finds out that his grant and scholarship have been pulled due to the fiasco with the law. In order to make up the tuition of, over $112,000, he has to join the work-study program as the school janitor. A fact that no one seems to notice for a while, despite the fact that he walks around in a janitor's outfit. We also start to see the effects that Ted's relationship with his dad has on the rest of his life. We see his anger rise. We see his need to be important really crop up. We see him deal with his abandonment issues, sometimes in good ways and sometimes in bad ways. And I appreciate the honesty with which those issues are dealt with. It's not that suddenly Ted's friends fill that void for him. It's that he tries to make them fill that void. And when they don't, he tends to have an adverse reaction. He tends to get upset. He tends to isolate. He tends to lash out. And that's real. That's how people operate. That's how young people operate especially. I think especially in seasons 2 and 3, the journey that Ted goes on could have been the primary story. It really is the most authentic coming-of-age story in the whole show. Ted struggles with personal importance. Ted struggles with his place in the world. Ted struggles with his place at VGHS. He struggles with his own curiosity. He knows he's not dumb, but he feels dumb. He knows the people around him make him feel worthless, but he knows he has inherent value. He knows he has something to bring to the table. And that's why he never truly fits in with the drifters. He fits in with his friends, but not in the way that he expects. And this season, we kind of see the fall of Ted, where he starts to manifest a lot of his damage, and it creates a rift over the course of the whole season between him and Brian. Ted and Brian have a few moments later in the season where Brian, purely out of frustration, says some harsh things to Ted. The most impactful thing he tells Ted is he's needy and selfish. And, I mean, Brian's not wrong. Ted is needy and he is selfish. And he does need to grow up and grow out of those things. But those words sink pretty deep for him. And combined with the abandonment Ted has felt growing since the first episode of the season, we start to see the seeds of some of his plot lines and character changes that come to fruition in season 3. The big lead-in for season 3 is at the end of the season 2 finale, Ted moves out of the dorm he shares with Brian D., leaving his best friend's badge on Brian's pillow. Key also has a bit of an identity crisis in season 2. So the only reason she joined rhythm gaming in season 1 was so that she could try to do something nice for Ted. And she finds a way to get dropped from rhythm gaming and spends an entire episode jumping from clan to clan. None of them really speak to her except for real-time strategy, but when she speaks up in the RTS classroom, Shane Stuffed Crust Pizza, remember the name, who is the leader of the RTS squad, calls her out for not being cool enough for RTS, and then puts it to a vote and allows the entire classroom to just rip her to shreds. Did that make sense? I feel like that didn't make sense.
You know, you're really cute, but I don't know what you're saying.
Back to Swan. She spends a lot of the season slowly coming to the realization that the reason she likes making games and the reason she likes learning about gamers as people is she enjoys making people happy. Her true passion is helping people, figuring out who they are and what they need, and finding ways to help them get where they need to be. Key is fleshed out to be rather noble in that way. Rounding off the Core 4, we have Jenny Matrix, who is beginning a 2-season struggle between her personal life and her career. A lot of the personal life struggles that she is having are directly related to how her relationship with Breezy Druezy, why did I say it like that? That is so dumb. I'm going to keep it in. Affects her career and affects her career opportunities. The real catalyst here is Coach Matrix. Coach Matrix really pushes Jenny, but only when it comes to FPS. She was an absent mother and spent her entire life chasing her career and leaving everyone else behind. So she fully expects Jenny to follow the same path. Coach Matrix believes the only way to succeed is the way she did it, alone, leaving everyone else behind you. And Jenny, having lived her entire life in the wake of her mother's decisions, sees the level of success she's risen to, but also remembers all too keenly the pain of only knowing her mother through game footage and seeing how much it hurt her dad to have to pick up the slack when Mary left. So, anyway, the law kind of occupies the majority of the B plot for season 2. After being convicted of hacking and aimbotting, he kind of hits a real rough patch of depression and moves back into the dorms. It's never really explained. I kind of thought he was kicked out of school, but I guess not. It doesn't matter. He's assigned Brian D as a roommate, and he just spends like a solid 4 episodes running around in his underwear, terrorizing the entire frag floor, and just being a giant goblin.
I just did that!
In episode 5, he starts to break out of that depression, and Shotbot has a lot to do with that.
Rebecca Barbara!
So the way it goes down is, in order to pull himself out of this depressive mania, he decides he's gonna hunt down whoever framed him, and he realizes it was
Shane Stuffed Crust Pizza.
He decides he's gonna, by the seat of his pants, find a way to prove that Shane framed him and clear his name. At the same time, Shotbot escapes being deactivated and swoops down to VGHS in an attempt to find a story so good the studio execs will be forced to keep them on. Episode 5 is a fucking whirlwind. So Shotbot shows up right as the Law is facing down Shane and two of his goons.
Is there a human story here?
Shotbot shows up just in time, and the two of them team up to prove his innocence.
Let's go!
Along the way, they fall in love, and there's this weird... Law doesn't realize it's Shotbot at first. He has to be told. That's weird, right? Anyway, Brian Ferenzi's a genius. This sounds dumb. It's absolutely hilarious. And shockingly heartwarming.
If you knew I was a robot, you'd never like me!
Shotbot. That's ridiculous.
So anyway, what was I saying? Shotbot ultimately sacrifices himself to save Law. I totally ship Law and Shotbot. What would their ship name be? Shaw? Lotbot? Tough nut to crack. Law clears his name. He's put back on the team. He helps them win a big game in the season finale. Then he's offered a contract to go play for
Napalm Energy Drink High,
which he then takes. And that's a season wrap for Law.
Let's hang glide out of this loser emporium.
I think the longer episode length for this season was definitely the biggest boost for the series. Season 1 told a story that was able to be told in 10-minute chunks. Season 2 really needed a lot more time to flesh itself out. Not only that, but the extra time really benefited the actors as well. The performances are just so much better. The characters are distinct, and now that the actors are given that extra breathing room, there's just so much more personality to them, especially the Law. You can tell Brian Ferenzi just had way too much fun this time around. This season we got a few fun cameos, but we also got some big name additions to the supporting cast. Coach Matrix is played by Cynthia Waitrose, who has just been all over the small screen for the better part of 3 decades. Shane Stuffed Crust Pizza is played by Chase Williamson. Bernie Burns and Joel Heyman of Rooster Teeth make a quick appearance as board members in a video conference with Calhoun. And during the televised proceedings of Law's hearings, we get a blink and you'll miss it cameo from Chris Hardwick as a news anchor, and the great and dearly departed Marvel Comics legend Stan Lee as Stan Leet. Season 3, by far, is the most ambitious season of VGHS. Let's summarize the plot real quick. We open with the rift between Brian D. and Theodore fully realized. Brian doesn't really understand why Ted hates him so much, and Ted is doing everything he can to avoid Brian. Jenny is waffling on her relationship with Brian again, because now she's being sized up by pro scouts. Key is running for class president against Shane Pizza, who is rich enough and savvy enough to undermine her every move. In episode 4, Freddy dies in a tragic motorcycle accident, and the Core 4 are forced to deal with it. I feel weird doing that hand motion there, but I'm committed to the bit.
Yay, comedy.
And finally, VGHS is bought by Napalm Energy Drink, who plans to turn it into a mall, and the student body bands together for one last chance to play the games they love before VGHS is no more. Season 3 is easily my favorite season of the entire show. Not only is it the best produced, best acted, best edited season of the show, but it also hits home for me. My father passed away a couple of months after VGHS's first season premiered. So when season 3 premiered 2 years later, I was still feeling a lot of that stuff. A lot of it was still fresh. And seeing the honest reaction to a major loss like that was rather comforting. It was really nice to see young people honestly dealing with death in this way. Ted is 16 when his dad passes away. I wasn't quite that young, but it was close enough that the maturity level and the mentality was still fresh in my mind. I still remembered what it was like to be 16, and I could only imagine being a few years younger when my old man passed away. In TV, most of the time, the youngest you'll see someone lose their parents is, they're in their 20s. Otherwise, they're an orphan and they're, 7 years old. Like Harry Potter was like a year old. There's no teenagers losing their parents. The last time we really saw that on TV was Boy Meets World with Sean. And yeah, I grew up with that show, but I was too young for that moment. So this one hit me at the right time, and that was really special. But enough of the sad stuff. It's time for... Let's start with Key for this season. At the end of season 2, Key Swan announced she was running for class president with the meek but supportive Wendell as her running mate. So as the final season opens, Key is well into the campaign swing. She's reaching out to the different gaming classes individually, trying to find out what they need in order to pledge their support. When she gets to the social gamers, however, she has a real awakening. The leader of the social gamers refuses to talk online, and will only discuss their needs if Key comes and visits them personally in the basement of the school. When she arrives, Key sees firsthand just how neglected the social gamers are. Their computers are incredibly outdated, they're literally left to work and study in a musty, poorly lit basement, and they're laughed off by the rest of the school as not being real gamers. Key has this galvanizing moment where she sees the voting pool as people again, and it rehumanizes the student body for Key, and it rehumanizes Key for us, the audience. Over the course of her campaign, Key attempts to help the students, and every time she announces a new pledge or plan, Shane Pizza swoops in and uses his money to take Key's idea and make it bigger and seemingly better. It raises the real world question where if the rich and powerful do the right thing just so they can remain rich and powerful, is it wrong? Is it still the right thing? In Shane's case, it ultimately is not. But even Key, for a moment, has to wonder if intent really matters. In the end, Key seems to be losing the election, and in a moment of weakness, she stuffs one of the ballot boxes, securing her win as class president. But Key's conscience is the real winner here, as she confesses both to her campaign team and to Dean Calhoun. Oh, and Ted kind of extorted one of the teams to secure their votes. So that, combined with Key recognizing her own growing corruption, makes her very much lose faith in VGHS as a whole, and she decides to withdraw. And Shane Stuffed Crust Pizza is now president. I just wanted to say Shane Stuffed Crust Pizza again.
So Key cheated everybody. Shane's president now.
She moves back home, where her parents are confused, but still happy to see her. And can I just say real quick that Key's parents are fucking awesome. In season 2, it's revealed that there is a Swan family rulebook where if Key ever feels that her parents are being unfair or being mean, or if she disagrees with any of their decisions, she is allowed to calmly and reasonably make her case and challenge the decision, which not only cultivates Key's voice and lets her know that her opinion is valuable and valued, but it also highlights the fact that Key's parents are perfect simply by acknowledging their imperfections. They put a caveat in their own child-rearing book that allows for their mistakes to be rectified. Nothing has to be set in stone. And that's beautiful. I wish Key's parents were my parents. Is it too late for me to get adopted by fictional characters?
Mr. Swan, adopt me, please. I'm begging you. My life is a mess.
Can you still see me down here? Anyway, so Key moves back into her parents' house, and the Core 4 all show up for various reasons. It's really nice sitting on this floor. See, I had a plan. I started with Key on purpose. I definitely didn't choose her randomly, and it just worked out for me. Ted and Brian drive to Key's house so that Ted can try to win her back. Oh yeah, Key broke up with him after the whole kidnapping and blackmail thing. I'll get to that later. Jenny arrives with the rest of Key's stuff from school, and everything is awkward. Everyone kind of hates everyone right now, so Key's parents set up a game designed to help the team work out their differences. And as they get into the thick of it, they receive a phone call that Freddie Wong has died in a motorcycle accident. I'll get into how that affects the others later, but for right now I'd like to focus on Key. She's conflicted and upset, and there's a lot going on. Obviously, she's broken up. Her kind of ex-boyfriend's dad just died, and they're all getting this news at the exact same time, so she feels bad for Ted. This is possibly the first time that Key Swan has had to deal with death, or at least a death this close, so she's processing all of that. But at the same time, she definitively knows that Freddie was cruel, especially to Ted. So she doesn't feel bad for Freddie. She feels bad for Ted. She subtly feels bad for herself. This chair just keeps sliding backwards on me. At some point, I'm gonna just be lying on the floor. She attempts to comfort Ted, but ultimately she has to learn the very hard lesson that no matter how smart you are, how prepared you are, or how good your heart is, some things just can't be fixed. Some things you just have to live through. She decides to go back to school, but now she's emo Key. Like, remember Dark Willow from Buffy or Void Styles from Teen Wolf? It's like that. But no powers. Just angst, anger, sadness. Yeah, it's nothing like those other two things. She's just emo. But Wendell, her former running mate, is now RA for the frag floor. And over the course of episode 5, he attempts to apologize for also being corrupt and trying to get Key elected by duplicitous means. No time to get into it because I forgot about it earlier, but he tried to frame Shane for kidnapping. And after apologizing, he pleads with Key that he needs her and the floor needs her. Things have been chaotic for the however many days she's been gone, and through his sheer dedication to reminding her of who she is deep down, Wendell helps Key not only find herself again, but also reinvigorates her love for making games and helping people. So, Shane Stuffed Crust Pizza turns out to actually be Shane Stuffed Crust Pizza Barnstormer, twin brother of Ashley Barnstormer and co-owner of the Napalm Energy Drink Company. Shane and Ashley were slighted by Calhoun years ago, vowed vengeance, blah, 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 and now they're buying the school and turning it into a mall. Key, along with 30 members of the student body and Calhoun, all team up to play one last game together, and they win by the skin of their teeth, and Mrs. Barnstormer, having realized how petty and short-sighted her son's decisions have been as of late, nullifies the purchase of the school, drags the boys out by the ear, and you could say she becomes the real hero of the series.
Everyone celebrates. Ted and Key are officially back together, and in the closing scene, we see Brian, Ted, and Key all playing a game that she made. Roll credits. I will get into how this ending makes me feel. Don't you worry. But for now, we have to talk about another member of the Core 4. Ted starts the season still very much upset with Brian. He's upset for a while. And this is another point of the reality of the show, where it is typically high school and college where we learn that friendships drift, and that has to be okay because that's how life goes. Your friends' lives cannot circle around you. He has to learn this lesson on his own. I appreciate that they went through the time to do this realistically because it makes everything about that character even more believable.
For Ted, this is a very stressful thing, and since so much of Brian's time is tied up in FPS and with Jenny, he feels slighted. He feels Brian no longer deserves to be his friend or his roommate.
As an adult, this is very obviously dumb and irrational, but in my teens, and even in my early 20s, Ted did not seem overly irrational. It's something everybody has to grow out of.
So Ted spends a bunch of energy being angry with Brian and starts to become disillusioned with his drift team. He sees that their lives are shallow and everything for them is about the instant pleasures in life. On prom night, the drift team conscripts him to borrow his dad's car, drive them to a XXX arcade, and then proceed to steal a nude racing game.
Theodore, I hold the high score on this machine.
A crime for which Ted is then blamed by the big scary men that own the arcade. The drift team then leaves him for dead, but Ted somehow catches up to them as they tow the game back to VGHS with Freddy's car. Drifting around a corner, they crash, and they nearly kill Ted, who, along with the nude racing game, plows straight into a wall. Freddy has apparently been living in his car and curses Ted with, eternal detention. Ted, who is starting to realize there's more out there than playing second fiddle to everyone all the time, simply walks away from the crash like a badass, while Growing Old is Getting Old by the Silver Sun Pickups plays us into the credits.
Beautiful song choice, by the way.
What happened to him, Ted?
Nothing.
Is that my Tomowachi in there? Oh my god, no!
What? We were going to lose, all right? They were being jerks. I didn't mean for it to die. Look, Key, I'm sorry, but you're president now. That's a good thing, right? It's just a freaking virtual pet. He'll get over it.
Key, you didn't know. This isn't your fault.
So Ted hitches a ride with his former best friend to the Swan household to try and win Key back. And while he's there, he gets the big-time bummer news that his old man croaked.
Ted is crushed. He tries to hide it, tries to pretend to not feel the immense weight of his father's loss, but ultimately he does crumble.
Mr. Swan is a beautiful foil to Freddy in all of this, especially. Mr. Swan is supportive and caring and understanding, but at the end of the day, he's not Freddy. And as terrible and shitty as he was, Ted still just wants his dad.
So, in the middle of the night, Teddy goes out to find a place to play his dad's video game. The rest of the core four find him at a laundromat playing his dad's game, playing songs so that he can hear his dad's approving words. He says he's beaten this game dozens of times just to hear his dad say the things that he never would have otherwise.
I can't breathe. I can't think. It hurts so much. Why is that, huh? Why does it hurt so much?
I didn't plan to say this part, so I may or may not keep it in. If you want to know what it looks like and what it feels like to grieve, there is no better distillation of what grief is like than the end of that episode. Ted crumples to the floor, and his friends huddle around him. All pretense and circumstance are gone. I'm going to go ahead and say yes and confirm your suspicions that when I say season 3 is my favorite, I'm a little biased because of how I feel about episode 4. It's all so beautifully crystallized. I would stack it up against Marshall's dad dying in How I Met Your Mother and Brendan Fraser dying in Scrubs as some of the best depiction of losing a loved one in the entire small screen and possibly all visual media. It is a beautiful depiction, honest, brutally honest depiction of this subject matter. And that said, once again, to save us from our feelings, give it up for The Law. We've got a clip, right? Please tell me we have a clip.
Juice up your jocks with Jock Juice. Slam it into your underpants and feel the surge. Do whatever you want to do with this can, man.
Ted goes back to school along with the rest of the crew, and he is a changed man. He at one point challenges DK for his title, and despite the race being mega unfair, Ted could have won fair and square. But he stops inches from the finish line and walks away, rejecting the title of Drift King. He declares he has a career. This is kind of funny, as he's taken a job at the Napalm Energy Drink Mega Mall as a corn dog vendor. But it also shows how Ted is growing up beyond the culture of VGHS. He's kind of come to that realization that there's a bigger world out there than just this little high school, and he wants to explore it for himself. Like he said, he's curious. He also joins the game against the Napalm Elite after Calhoun signs up, and in the end, he winds up at Brian D's house with his best friends. Also, during the final battle, we get a great send-off to Freddy as Ted has a flashback to this memory. Moving right along, let's talk about Jenny Matrix. After the major ripples the team made under her leadership in Season 2, Jenny is being scouted by a Major League FPS team, specifically her favorite team from France, the Panthers. However, she does still love Brian D. and must decide what she loves most. This decision absolutely tears her up inside, and she waffles between wanting the stability Brian brings to her life and the chance to follow her dreams. For the first time in her whole life, Coach Matrix actually settles into the mom role and gives Jenny some good advice.
You know, I'm trying to be a mom here. Yeah? Well, you're terrible at it.
Jenny breaks up with Brian. Obviously, it's not pretty. And almost immediately, Key leaves school, and we get the news that Freddy died. During that period of time, Jenny and Brian kind of get back together, but not in a super serious kind of way. At this point, they are wise enough to know that their future is somewhat volatile, so they're going to enjoy and cherish the time they have now, but they're not going to put too many expectations on each other. This frees Jenny up to, really think about her future. And when Napalm announces that they are closing VGHS, Brian has to go back to normal school, so the two of them are looking at specifically schools that Jenny could go to that would benefit her career. So, long distance relationship, hold on loosely, all that fun stuff. Jenny Matrix and Key Swan come up with the plan to have one last game as peers and students of VGHS, and they recruit everyone they can from across all the different game types. Drifters, stealth gamers, real-time strategists, social gamers. They find a way to play to everyone's strengths. And Jenny gives a speech about how no matter the outcome, she's glad to hit the field with everyone one last time and show the world what VGHS was made of. In the end, Jenny gets an offer and she takes it.
she's got to say goodbye to Brian. And, it's bittersweet, but it's cute. It's not what you expect, but you're proud of her for doing what's best for her. And you're proud of Brian for letting her go. And you're just proud of the both of them for growing to this point together. They leave on good terms because they've basically spent the entire season learning how to say goodbye to each other. And now they've realized they love each other and care about each other enough to want what's best for the other person. And now we end the series where we started it, with Brian D. When season starts, Ted is big mad at Brian, and Brian really doesn't know why. And because these boys are in high school, they do not know how to communicate, so they don't come to any sort of conclusion until way after they should have. Brian is a typical big-brained 16-year-old boy. And by that, I mean he is dumb as a box of rocks, dense as all shit.
Calhoun, please. I don't have a dad. I just danced with my cat. I need an adult.
So dense, in fact, that he misses every single sign that Jenny sends him. Things are not okay and that she needs to talk to him about something serious. Jenny tells him they've got to talk, and he thinks she wants to go to Bone Town, and in reality, she needs to break up with him because of the whole Panthers thing. And it's not great. Pretty embarrassing.
So at dinner tonight, you're breaking up with me?
Everyone grows up a little bit in the light of Freddy's death, and that includes Brian D. Even though he somewhat gets back together with Jenny, he's able to appreciate the now and accepts whatever comes along. When VGHS's closing is announced, he quickly accepts the idea of a long-distance relationship. And when Jenny gets the opportunity of a lifetime in France, he congratulates her and lets her know that choosing her career isn't going to ruin their friendship. In the final moments of the series, we see Calhoun hand Brian a mop as he tells him they have a lot of work to do. Brian watches Jenny on a TV with a smile on his face, and the very last scene is him rushing home to hang out with Ted and Key at his house.
And it's time for this season's speedrun. Put an arbitrary amount of time on the clock, and go! The law gets fired by Napalm, and his IP and his name no longer belong to him. Meet new Law.
Peekabooski.
Law is recruited by VGHS for the final battle against Napalm.
I know what you're here for, D. And I'm in.
And he spends the entire game both competing against New Law and falling a little bit in love with the New Law.
Fair warning. My Vespa's only got one seat.
Hey, that's all right. I got a tiny butt.
I know.
Shane and Ashley Barnstormer take over the school, torment everyone, especially Calhoun, and then revert back to being angry, spoiled toddlers when mommy shows up and ruins their fun.
And I think that's about it. Oh, you see Calhoun feeding his kid at some point. So you know that time where he said that his kid was a jerk. He was talking about a 1-year-old. As a father, I completely understand that, because children are gremlins. I love my child. He's wonderful. But he's a living embodiment of a Sour Patch Kid.
So somehow I forgot that John Ennis plays Mr. Swan. You may not know the name, but you probably know his face, and you definitely know his voice. This guy's been acting for like 30-something years, and he's been all over. He typically takes smaller parts, but he takes a metric fuck ton of them. Dude works. Marsha fucking Brady plays Mrs. Barnstormer.
You don't understand, Mom.
Which, if I think about it, that's kind of the mom that I would expect Marsha Brady to grow up to be. The kind of mom who keeps her billionaire boys in check by pulling them out of a stadium by their ears. Also, I spelled Marsha 3 different ways in this script, because sometimes the jokes are just for me.
The special effects and soundtrack in this series are absolutely top-notch. The practical effects, like especially the pyrotechnics, really pull you into the FPS battle scenes.
I'm just a lowly bard who haphazardly arranged his skill points between strength and charisma, so I am way too dumb to understand a lot of this stuff, but I do appreciate the geniuses who put it together. This soundtrack fucking snaps, slaps, and smacks. It's amazing. The majority of the score is composed by Igor Nemirovsky, and a lot of the songs are from the Proto-Men, with the exception of a few, like that one Silver Sun pickup song I referenced earlier. I love the way those songs punctuate those moments. Now, normally, you don't really notice soundtrack, and when you do, it pulls you out of a moment because it draws the attention to the music. But in this case, specifically with Growing Old is Getting Old, Light Up the Night by the Protomen, and Lionheart by the Protomen, these songs are so perfect that to put anything else in their place would have been a disservice to the show in general. When Ted is walking down the street and the opening riff for Growing Old starts to play, you're sucked deeper in. And then Lionheart, which opens season 3, episode 6. Everyone is somber, everyone is either packing or hiding, and this song just resonates. It's almost like a chant that echoes off of the emptying halls. I am definitely not in the minority when I say I am forever grateful, not only for the show, but also for the ways it changed YouTube as a platform and the way we view creators and channels. Video Game High School brought a level of legitimacy to making videos on YouTube that gives so many of us who follow in Rocket Jump's wake the opportunity to do what we love. Sippable opinions would not be a thing without Rocket Jump first paving the way, especially with projects like VGHS. I can only hope that someday we get the chance to make a few films of our own. If and when that day arrives, you can bet your balls I'll be personally inviting Freddie, Matt, Brandon, and Brian to that premiere. And if that day never comes, I'm going to say thank you right now. Thank you for giving us Jenny, who inspires us to follow our dreams. Thank you for giving us Brian, who inspires us to love people enough to let them go when the time comes. Thank you for giving us Ted, who inspires us to balance maturity and whimsy. Thank you for giving us Key, who inspires us to both be happy with who we are and always strive to be better. And above all, thank you for reminding us to do it all for the game.
I'm gonna put your teeth in New Law's mouth, so the police must identify both your bodies!
I'll take the store credit!
It's the perfect murder!
Hey, Law.
Wait in the car, Brian!
I rode my bike.
Wait in the car!